The evening started like many others in the small apartment. The light outside the window was fading, and the room was filled with the quiet sounds of daily life. A pot sat on the stove, the smell of simple food floating in the air. Toys were scattered across the floor, colorful and worn, signs of a young child who spent most of his days inside these walls. She moved slowly, tired from a long day, her body aching in a way she had grown used to. Life had taught her not to complain. Her husband sat on the couch staring at his phone, his face tight and distant. He had been quiet all evening, the kind of silence that made her nervous. She knew this mood. It came without warning and often ended badly. She tried to keep her voice calm, asking him if he wanted to eat. There was no answer. She asked again, softer this time. He sighed loudly, as if her voice itself annoyed him. Their toddler sat on the floor nearby, pushing a small toy car back and forth. The child laughed softly, unaware of the tension growing thicker by the minute. She looked at her child and smiled, forcing warmth into her eyes. For that small moment, she felt safe. Her child was her reason to keep going, her reason to wake up each day even when fear lived quietly in her chest. The argument began over something small. It always did. A question about money. A complaint about the house. A word spoken the wrong way. His voice grew louder, sharp, and accusing. She tried to explain, then tried to stay silent. She had learned that silence sometimes made things worse. But speaking back was even more dangerous. She stood near the kitchen counter, her hand shaking as she held a dish towel. Her heart raced, not from anger, but from fear. She had seen this look in his eyes before. It was the look that told her to be careful. The toddler stopped playing and looked up, sensing something was wrong. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were closing in. She asked him to lower his voice, glancing at their child. That was when everything changed. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood up. The sudden noise made the toddler flinch. Her husband stepped closer, his anger spilling out in harsh words. She backed away without thinking, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She never meant to argue. She never meant for things to go this far. But fear can make even the calmest voice sound weak, and weakness only seemed to fuel his rage. He shouted that he was tired. Tired of everything. Tired of her. She tried to move past him, hoping to pick up her child and go into the other room. She did not get the chance. The moment happened fast, too fast to stop. One sudden movement, a sharp force. She felt herself fall backward. Her head struck the edge of the counter as she collapsed to the floor. Pain flashed through her body, bright and overwhelming. She tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy, distant. Her ears rang, and the room spun wildly around her. The last thing she saw was her child standing frozen. Tiny hands clenched, eyes wide with fear. She wanted to call out to tell him everything would be okay, but her mouth would not move. Darkness rushed in, pulling her away before she could make a sound. The apartment went quiet. Too quiet. Her body lay still on the cold floor, one arm twisted awkwardly beneath her. The pot on the stove began to boil over, steam filling the kitchen with a sharp smell. The sound of bubbling water was the only sign that time was still moving forward. Her husband stood there, breathing hard, staring at her as if he could not believe what had just happened. Panic crossed his face. He looked at the toddler, then back at her unmoving body. For a moment it seemed like he might help her. But fear of consequences was stronger than fear for her life. He grabbed his jacket, his phone, and without another word, rushed out the door. Leaving everything behind, the door slammed shut. The echo lingered in the room. Silence returned, broken only by the soft whimper of a child. The toddler took a few slow steps toward his mother. He knelt beside her and touched her face with his small hand. Her skin felt cold. He called out to her in the only words he knew, his voice shaky and unsure. There was no response. Confused and frightened, he shook her gently, then harder. Still nothing. Tears filled his eyes. He did not understand why she would not wake up. She always woke up. She always came when he cried. He sat down beside her and cried too, the sound raw and helpless. Minutes passed. Maybe more. Time meant nothing to him. Eventually, his cries grew quieter. He leaned against her arm, exhausted, waiting for her to move. But she did not. The room grew darker as night settled in fully. The lights were still on, but the warmth of the evening was gone. Somewhere deep inside, the toddler felt that something was very wrong. His fear turned into a strange urge, something pushing him to do something, anything. He remembered moments when his mother had spoken gently to him, showing him small things. How to turn the door handle, how to step outside without being scared, how neighbors lived just a few steps away. He stood up slowly, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked at his mother one last time, then toward the door. The door seemed big and heavy, but he walked toward it anyway. His legs trembled, but he did not stop. With effort, he reached up and unlocked the door the way she had shown him. The click sounded loud in the quiet apartment. He pulled the door open and stepped into the hallway, barefoot and alone. The lights there were dim, and strange shadows lined the walls. He hesitated, fear gripping his chest. But the thought of his mother lying on the floor pushed him forward. He took one step, then another, moving toward the nearest door he recognized. His small hand lifted and knocked, weak at first, then harder. He waited, his heart pounding, hoping someone would answer. Behind him, in the silent apartment, his mother lay unconscious. Unaware that the smallest person in her life was about to make the bravest choice of all, the toddler stood in the dim hallway, the apartment door closing behind him with a soft click. He shivered, the cold floor pressing against his small bare feet. Every sound echoed loudly in the empty space, the faint hum of a distant fridge, the creak of the stairwell, and the occasional distant car passing by outside. He looked around nervously, trying to remember where he had seen someone before. The fear inside him was strong, but a stronger force love for his mother pushed him forward. He walked slowly down the hallway, his tiny fingers brushing along the wall for guidance. Every step felt heavy, but he kept moving. He remembered his mother teaching him about neighbors who could help when he was scared. There were kind people close by, people who would listen and do something. He had never had to go to them alone before, but now he had no choice. He stopped at the first door he recognized. It was slightly open, and he could see light spilling into the hallway. He hesitated, unsure if it was okay to enter. Fear wrapped around him like a blanket, but then he remembered his mother lying on the floor, her face pale and still. His heart clenched. He had to try. He knocked lightly at first, then louder when no one answered. His voice shook as he said, "Help, Mama." Inside, a neighbor stirred. They had been watching television but noticed the small figure standing at the door. A soft voice asked, "Who is there?" The toddler blinked, not fully understanding the question, but the words poured out from him in bursts. "Mama, she'll fall. She'll not wake. Help." His tiny hands pressed against the door, desperate to make someone understand. The neighbor hurried to the door and opened it. The sight of the small child, trembling and scared, pulled them immediately into action. "It's okay, sweetie. Come with me," they said gently, taking the toddler's hand. He clung to them, feeling the warmth of a hand that promised safety, safety he had never known before. They ran back to the apartment together. The neighbor's heart raced as they entered the room and saw her lying on the floor. Panic threatened to take over, but the neighbor quickly moved to check her breathing and called emergency services. The toddler watched, unsure of what to do. He had done what he could, but now he needed to stay calm, to be near his mother, and pray that she would wake up. The toddler followed the neighbor closely, pointing to his mother and whispering, "Wake up. Mama, wake up." His voice was small, but it carried the weight of his hope, his innocence, and his bravery. The neighbor reassured him, gently guiding him to a chair so he could watch but stay out of the way. The child nodded silently, his eyes never leaving his mother. Minutes felt like hours as they waited for help to arrive. The toddler's small hand found the edge of the chair, gripping it tightly. He remembered the moments when his mother had told him that even when things seemed impossible, there was always a way. He whispered softly, "You can wake up, Mama. You can wake up," over and over. His determination was quiet but unbreakable. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the quiet night. paramedics arrive, moving quickly but carefully, assessing the situation with professional eyes. The toddler stepped back, holding onto the neighbor's hand as they carried his mother out of the room and onto the stretcher. He watched as they loaded her into the ambulance, a strange mix of fear and hope swirling inside him. He had saved her, even if he did not fully understand the danger she had been in. The neighbor knelt beside him and explained gently, "Your mama is going to be okay. The people taking her are very good. They will help her get better." The toddler nodded, his small shoulders tense but steady. He wanted to believe every word, and in that moment he did. Hope began to seep into the fear that had dominated the evening. The ride to the hospital was filled with quiet murmurs from the paramedics, checking vitals and keeping a careful watch. The toddler stayed seated, holding the neighbor's hand tightly. He could see his mother's face, pale under the hospital lights, but he also saw the promise of help and care. He did not fully understand medicine or doctors, but he trusted them because they were doing something he could not do alone at the hospital. Nurses took over quickly, guiding the toddler to a waiting area with the neighbor. The lights were bright, but the atmosphere was calmer than the apartment had been. The neighbor explained the procedures in simple words, assuring the child that his mother was in good hands. The toddler sat quietly listening and watching, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He could sense that the danger was not entirely gone, but the most immediate threat, the one that had made him act, was being handled. The hours passed slowly. The toddler remained by the neighbor's side, occasionally glancing toward the room where his mother was being treated. He did not fully understand the seriousness of her injuries, but he understood enough to know that she needed him, and he needed to be brave. He drew small pictures on a napkin, trying to keep his mind occupied, and whispered stories to himself about the adventures they would have once she was better. The neighbor watched him quietly, amazed by his courage. For a child so young, he had done something extraordinary. He had acted when many adults might have frozen in fear. The weight of responsibility he carried on his small shoulders was incredible, yet he did not complain. He simply focused on what mattered most, his mother's safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to the toddler, a doctor came out to speak with them. Kneeling to be at eye level with the child, the doctor explained gently, "Your mother is resting now. She's getting the care she needs. You were very brave tonight." The toddler nodded silently, relief flooding him in small, quiet waves. He understood enough to feel that his actions had mattered, that his courage had made a difference, even as he sat there. The toddler could not help but think about the moments in the apartment, about the fear he had felt and the choices he had made. He knew that things would not be the same again, that life had changed in ways he did not yet fully understand. But he also knew that he had faced something terrifying and had acted with courage. Beyond his years, he held onto the neighbor's hand tightly, whispering again, "Mama, wake up soon." And though the night had been filled with fear, the child's small heart was filled with hope, a hope strong enough to carry him through the darkness that had surrounded them. In that quiet hospital waiting area, the smallest hero had found a way to make a difference, to change the course of the night, and to bring light to a moment that could have ended in despair. The hospital waiting room was quiet except for the occasional shuffle of nurses and the soft beep of machines from nearby rooms. The toddler sat on a small chair, his legs swinging slightly, eyes fixed on the door where his mother had been taken. Every sound made him tense, every movement caught his attention. He had waited for what felt like forever, but he refused to leave her side. Even though he did not fully understand everything, he knew he had to stay brave. The neighbor sat beside him, gently rubbing his back to reassure him. They spoke softly, explaining that the doctors were doing everything they could. The toddler listened, nodding slowly, but his thoughts were with his mother. He kept whispering little encouragements under his breath, "Mama, wake up soon," over and over again. It was a small ritual, something he could do to feel close to her while she was gone. Minutes stretched into hours. The toddler shifted in his chair, rubbing his eyes. His stomach grumbled, but he hardly noticed. He was too focused on waiting, on being there when she woke. He thought about the evening before, about the fear and the darkness in the apartment. But he also thought about how he had acted, how he had found the strength to seek help. In his young mind, it felt like a long journey, and yet he had already crossed it once. The bravery that had carried him through the night now held him steady in the bright hospital lights. The nurse returned, carrying a small blanket and a warm smile. She knelt down, careful to be at his level, and said, "You've been very brave tonight. Your mother is resting now, and she is in good hands." The toddler nodded, taking in every word. He felt a little proud, but mostly he felt relief. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself a small exhale. He wrapped the blanket around his shoulders, hugging it close like it was a piece of his mother's love. The neighbor suggested they bring him some water and a small snack, but he shook his head. Food was not important right now. All that mattered was that his mother would wake, that he had done the right thing. The neighbor smiled gently, understanding that a child's mind works differently than an adult's. He was living in the moment, driven by love and courage that far outweighed his age. Meanwhile, in the room where she was lying, the doctors worked with care and precision. Her injuries were serious, but not beyond repair. Machines monitored her breathing and heart, and every few minutes nurses checked her vitals. They were aware that she had arrived just in time, thanks to the brave actions of her toddler. The knowledge that someone had intervened so quickly gave them hope. They moved efficiently, focusing on the steps that could save her. Back in the waiting room, the toddler began to fidget. He stood up and paced a little, glancing at the door repeatedly. Every time it opened, his heart leapt with anticipation, only to sink when no one came out. The neighbor held his hand gently, letting him move, but staying close to ensure he remained safe. The child whispered to himself, making up stories about the doctors and nurses, imagining them as helpers in a magical world where everyone worked together to protect those in need. This helped him cope with the fear, turning worry into imagination. Hours passed slowly. The sun began to rise outside, painting the city in soft light. The toddler watched the sky through the large hospital windows, thinking about how the night had seemed endless and dark. But now, even in exhaustion, there was a faint sense of hope. He remembered the way his mother had always encouraged him to be brave, to keep trying even when things felt scary. He had listened to her advice without fully understanding it, and now it had guided him through a night that could have ended badly. The neighbor gently encouraged him to rest for a few minutes. They found a quiet corner, and the toddler leaned against the soft chair, closing his eyes. Sleep tugged at him, but he resisted at first, afraid to miss any moment his mother might wake. Gradually, his eyelids became heavy, and he allowed himself to rest. Trusting that the doctors were doing their work and that he had already done everything he could, when he opened his eyes, the room was brighter. Nurses and doctors moved quietly, tending to patients. The neighbor whispered, "She is waking now. You can go see her soon." The toddler's eyes widened, and he bolted to the door, holding the neighbor's hand tightly. His heart raced with a mix of excitement and fear. He did not know exactly what to expect, but he knew he wanted to be there, entering the room. The toddler saw his mother's face, still pale, but slowly regaining color. She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light. For a moment, she looked around, confused, and then her gaze fell on her child. Relief flooded her features as she reached out weakly. The toddler hurried to her side, kneeling beside the bed and taking her hand in his small grasp. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he whispered softly, "I found help, Mama. You're okay now." She tried to speak, but could only manage a weak smile. The sight of her child, so brave and full of love, filled her with emotion. She felt a mixture of gratitude, relief, and awe at the courage of the little person she had brought into the world. The doctors and nurses watched quietly, understanding the significance of the moment. A child's bravery had made a life-saving difference. They gave the family space, knowing that this reunion was more powerful than any words or medical explanations could express. The room, once filled with fear and urgency, was now quiet, filled with the fragile yet profound bond between mother and child. Throughout the morning, the toddler stayed close, whispering encouragements and offering gentle touches. He did not fully understand everything, but he understood that love and presence mattered. Every small gesture, every word, was his way of helping, of being part of the healing process. The mother watched him, her heart heavy with gratitude and wonder. She realized that the courage of this tiny human had changed their fate as the day progressed. The doctors explained the situation to her in simple terms. They praised the actions of the toddler, explaining how quickly he had acted and how his bravery had made a critical difference. She listened, amazed at the clarity and instinct of her child. Even in his young age, he had shown a depth of courage that was extraordinary. Her thoughts were a mix of pride and deep love, knowing that this child had already faced a situation most adults could not handle. The toddler, unaware of the full complexity of the situation, simply wanted his mother to be better. He stayed beside her, holding her hand and humming softly. He told little stories, shared imaginary adventures, and reminded her that she was loved. Every moment was simple, natural, and human, a reflection of the deep bond between mother and child. Even as the day moved forward and visitors came to check on them, the focus remained on this quiet, powerful connection. The child's courage, his instinctive action, and unwavering love had not only saved a life, but had created a story of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary power of innocence. In that small hospital room, amid the machines and the bright lights, a tiny hero had proven that even the smallest person could make the biggest difference. The hospital room was quiet in the late afternoon, filled with soft sounds of machines and occasional footsteps outside the door. The mother lay in the bed, her body recovering slowly, her breathing steady but shallow. She opened her eyes and looked around, taking in the room and the people moving quietly. She felt exhausted, her body heavy with pain. But her heart was lighter knowing that her child had acted with such bravery. The toddler sat in the chair beside the bed, fidgeting with the edge of the blanket wrapped around him. He had been waiting for this moment, and now that she was awake, his relief was visible in the way he leaned closer to her, holding her hand carefully. His small face was full of concern and hope, mixed with the innocence of a child who had faced more fear than most people ever do. He did not fully understand what had happened, but he knew enough to know that it had been serious. She tried to speak, her voice weak and hoarse. But the toddler leaned in, listening intently. He encouraged her silently with his presence, holding her hand as if to remind her that she was not alone. Each small movement, each quiet touch, was his way of communicating courage and love. She felt tears pricking her eyes, not just from the physical pain, but from the realization of what had just occurred. The child who should have been protected had instead been the one to protect her. Outside the room, the hospital staff moved with care, keeping the environment calm and supportive. Doctors and nurses checked her vitals, gave instructions, and explained in gentle terms what steps would follow. She listened as much as she could, her mind focusing on understanding enough to feel safe. But her attention kept returning to her toddler, to the little person who had made all the difference. The child began to talk softly, recounting in his own way the night's events, as much as he could remember. "I went to get help. I knocked. I told them." His words were small and sometimes jumbled, but his meaning was clear. She squeezed his hand gently, giving him a weak smile, encouraging him to continue. The neighbor sat nearby, quietly watching, marveling at the courage and presence of mind in such a young child. It was extraordinary how a tiny human could make a difference that adults sometimes could not. Time passed slowly. She tried to sit up slightly, careful not to strain her body, while the toddler remained close. He adjusted his chair to be nearer, leaning over to see her better, asking questions about her well-being in simple words. "Does it hurt, Mama? Are you okay?" He did not fully understand injuries, but he understood love and concern. She responded with soft words, reassuring him that she was going to be okay and that he had been very brave. Each small exchange strengthened both of them, a mutual bond of courage and care. The doctors came in again, explaining that she would need rest, medication, and careful observation. She nodded, listening and understanding enough to trust them. The toddler, however, could not sit still. He wanted to stay as close as possible, his little hands gripping hers, his eyes never leaving her face. His actions were instinctive, born from love, fear, and the need to be near the one person he cared for most. Hours went by, and the neighbor encouraged the toddler to take small breaks to eat and drink. He obeyed reluctantly, always keeping one eye on his mother. Even as he nibbled on food, his mind remained with her, thinking of the moments that had led to this day. He recalled the apartment, the darkness, the fear, and how he had acted when no one else could. It was a lot for someone so young. But he bore it with quiet determination. The mother's strength grew slowly, her awareness returning, and she became more able to communicate. She praised the toddler quietly, speaking softly to let him know how proud she was of him. "You were so brave," she whispered, her voice still weak but filled with emotion. The toddler beamed, the pride in his small chest visible in the way he straightened his posture. It was a rare moment where a child felt the weight of recognition for actions beyond his years. Later, the hospital staff brought in a social worker to check on their situation, ensuring that both mother and child were safe and had support. They explained that protective measures would be taken and that someone would stay with them to provide help as needed. The toddler listened, curious, but not fully understanding the details. All he understood was that the people around him were there to make sure he and his mother were safe. As evening approached, the mother was able to sit up slightly in bed, supported by pillows. The toddler climbed onto the edge of the bed, holding her hand and whispering, "You're okay now, Mama. You're safe." She smiled weakly, her eyes watering. She felt the immense weight of the past hours, of the fear, the pain, and the courage that had saved them. She realized that the strength of her child had carried them through a night that could have ended in disaster. The neighbor watched quietly, giving them space, while the hospital staff ensured everything was in order. The toddler adjusted his blanket around him, still holding his mother's hand, content to be near her. He hummed softly, a small sound, but one that carried comfort and reassurance. The room, once tense and filled with fear, was now calm. With a quiet sense of safety and recovery, the mother looked at her child, her eyes filled with gratitude and love. She reached out to stroke his hair gently, marveling at the bravery he had shown. The toddler leaned into her touch, feeling the warmth and connection that no fear or darkness could ever break. In that moment, she understood that even in the hardest times, the bond between them was unshakable, a force stronger than any danger they had faced. Throughout the night, they stayed close, the mother slowly regaining strength and the toddler remaining steadfast. Each small movement, each whisper, each touch was a reminder of what had been lost, what had been saved, and how courage and love had carried them forward. In the quiet hospital room, they both found comfort, hope, and a new understanding of each other's strength. The events of the night were behind them, but the lessons, the bravery, the bond would remain forever. The next morning brought a soft light into the hospital room. The mother was sitting up more comfortably, supported by pillows, and her breathing was steady. The toddler, small but vigilant, sat on the edge of the bed, watching her every move. The quiet hum of the machines and the gentle footsteps of nurses made the atmosphere calm. But the room was filled with a feeling that something important had changed in their lives forever. She reached for her child's hand, holding it gently. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice still soft but filled with deep emotion. The toddler looked up at her, his eyes wide, still processing the events of the past night. He did not fully understand the danger he had faced, but he understood that his actions had mattered, that he had helped his mother when she needed him most. The neighbor who had stayed with them since the night of the incident sat quietly nearby, watching the scene unfold. There was a sense of relief and wonder, a realization that this small human had shown courage beyond comprehension. They offered quiet words of reassurance, explaining that she was safe now, and that everything that could be done had been done. The toddler listened closely, occasionally nodding, still holding tightly to his mother's hand. Doctors and nurses came in periodically, checking her condition and ensuring everything was progressing smoothly. Each check brought reassurance, not just to the mother, but also to the toddler. He was learning to trust the people around him, seeing that there were adults who would act to protect him and his mother. His tiny hand squeezed hers again, and he whispered softly, "You'll be okay now, Mama. I'm here." The mother smiled weakly, tears welling in her eyes. She stroked his hair, marveling at how brave he had been. The thought of the night before the darkness, the fear, the helplessness, made her feel both sadness and gratitude. She knew that without his courage, things could have been very different. She wanted to tell him how proud she was, how thankful she was, but words were not enough. She held him close instead, letting her touch speak for the emotions she could not put into words. Throughout the day, the hospital staff continued to provide care and guidance. The social worker returned to discuss their situation and ensure they would have support after leaving the hospital. She explained in gentle terms the steps being taken to protect both mother and child and offered resources for help. The mother listened attentively, realizing that the events of the past night would have long-lasting consequences, but also that support was available to help them rebuild their lives. The toddler watched everything closely, curious but calm. He had acted in a moment of courage. Now he saw that the adults around him were working to make sure he and his mother would be safe in the future. He felt a quiet pride, a sense that he had done something important. Even in his small frame, he carried the weight of the night. But he also carried the knowledge that love and bravery had the power to change outcomes later in the afternoon. The mother began to eat a light meal. The toddler sat nearby, watching carefully, occasionally offering her bits of food he had picked up. Each gesture was small, but it was his way of helping and showing care. She smiled at him, feeling a warmth and connection that went beyond words. The bond between them had been strengthened in ways she could not have imagined. She realized that her child had not only saved her life physically, but had also shown her the power of courage, love, and instinct. As the day went on, they shared quiet moments together. The mother rested while the toddler played quietly with small toys he had brought from home. He told her stories, sometimes making up words, sometimes just describing the world around him. She listened, sometimes laughing softly, sometimes just watching him, feeling an immense sense of love and admiration. Each small moment, each shared look or gesture, was a reminder of the bond that had kept them safe and strong. In the evening, a doctor came to speak with them about the next steps. They explained that her recovery would continue at home with proper care, and that she would be monitored to ensure there were no further complications. The mother nodded, understanding the importance of rest and continued caution. The toddler listened quietly, taking in the information as best as he could. He did not fully understand the medical details, but he understood that things were going to be okay now, and that was enough. After the doctor left, the mother held her child close again. She whispered words of gratitude and love, telling him that he was a hero. The toddler smiled shyly, not fully realizing the magnitude of his actions. He only knew that he had been brave, that he had helped his mother, and that she was now safe. The realization of his courage and its impact began to settle in quietly, a gentle understanding forming in his young mind. The neighbor and hospital staff continued to provide guidance, ensuring that when they returned home, both mother and child would have the support they needed. Plans were made for follow-up visits, protective measures, and emotional support. The mother felt a sense of relief, knowing that they were not alone, and that steps were being taken to create a safe environment for both her and her child. As night fell, the room grew quiet once more. The toddler curled up next to his mother, holding her hand and humming softly. She stroked his hair, feeling the strength and bravery that had carried them through the night. They were safe now, but the memory of the events remained. A reminder of the courage that had saved them and the bond that had grown stronger through adversity. In that quiet hospital room, mother and child rested together. The fear, the pain, and the uncertainty of the past night were slowly replaced with safety, love, and a sense of hope for the future. The child's courage had changed their fate, and the mother's gratitude and admiration filled the room with warmth. They had survived, and they had survived together, strengthened by love, bravery, and the unbreakable bond between them. The night had ended, and a new beginning had begun. One built on trust, resilience, and the extraordinary power of a child's courage. Days turned into weeks, and the mother's recovery continued steadily. Every morning she awoke feeling a little stronger than the day before. Though the memory of the night that had changed everything was always with her, The toddler remained her constant companion, watching over her as she moved carefully around the hospital room and then their home. His little hands were always ready to help, whether holding hers, passing her water, or simply sitting nearby to make sure she was okay. Though the immediate danger had passed, the mother felt a mix of emotions. Fear, relief, gratitude, and even a quiet anger sometimes surfaced. She knew that the events could have ended much worse, and she thought often about how fragile life can be. But most of all, she focused on the courage of her child, who had acted instinctively to save her life. Even now, the image of him running down the hallway, knocking on doors, and seeking help filled her with awe. The toddler, too, was adjusting. He had seen fear and uncertainty at a level that many adults never experience. Yet in the midst of it, he had found a way to act. And he had learned a lesson about bravery and love that would stay with him forever. Now, in calmer moments, he played quietly, telling stories to his mother or showing her the little things he had collected over the past days. He had a sense of pride, though he did not fully understand the impact of his actions. Friends and extended family began visiting, bringing warmth, food, and comfort. The mother was grateful for their support, though she always kept her eyes on her child first. Every visit reminded her that they were not alone, that kindness and care existed beyond their immediate circle. She noticed how her child's actions had affected everyone, inspiring admiration and gentle smiles. People often remarked on his bravery, and she made sure he heard each word, gently reinforcing that he had done something extraordinary. As she grew stronger, the mother began to think about what had led them to this point. She thought about the difficult moments in the apartment, the fear she had felt, and the choice her child had made to seek help. She realized that even in the darkest times, there is a possibility for courage and change. Her heart felt heavy with the knowledge of what had happened, but lighter because she had a chance to build a better life from it. She began planning for the future, thinking about ways to ensure they would be safe and happy. The social worker continued to provide guidance, helping her understand legal protections, counseling options, and support services. The mother listened carefully, absorbing each detail, determined to create a safe environment for her child and herself. The toddler, unaware of the technical details, simply focused on staying close to his mother. Sensing her concern and wanting to be part of the solution in his own way, one afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the window, she and the toddler sat together quietly. He was playing with small toys, and she watched him with a mixture of love, awe, and gratitude. She thought about how much he had grown emotionally in such a short time, how he had learned lessons about courage, responsibility, and love far beyond his years. Every small smile, every gentle touch, reminded her that life, even after hardship, could be filled with warmth and hope. The mother also reflected on the importance of speaking out, of seeking help when needed. She thought about the night of the attack and how critical it had been for someone to respond quickly. The bravery of her child had made all the difference. But she knew that the support of neighbors, friends, and the hospital staff was equally important. She resolved to use her experience to be vigilant, to advocate for herself and her child, and to help others, if ever they faced similar situations, as they prepared to leave the hospital. The mother felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. Returning home meant regaining independence, but it also meant facing the reality of daily life with caution. She carried with her the lessons of patience, vigilance, and love. The toddler walked beside her, holding her hand tightly, ready to face the world together. They had survived the darkest night, and now they were moving forward into the light. Their home had been prepared with care. Friends and family had helped ensure that everything was safe and comfortable. The mother noticed how even the smallest details had been considered, from locks to emergency contacts, creating an environment where she and her child could thrive. The toddler explored their home with curiosity and joy, reminding her that life could be simple, innocent, and happy. Even after fear and uncertainty in the evenings, they would sit together quietly, sharing stories and moments of laughter. The mother read to her child, often recounting tales of courage and kindness, reinforcing lessons he had already demonstrated in real life. The toddler listened intently, absorbing every word, sometimes repeating phrases back. His small voice full of enthusiasm and understanding. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. The mother realized that the events of the past days had reshaped their relationship, deepening love, trust, and understanding. She saw her child not just as someone to care for, but as a partner in life's journey, capable of extraordinary courage and instinctive wisdom. Each day, she was grateful for the chance to witness his growth and to guide him in safety and love. The neighborhood, too, became a source of comfort. Neighbors had been inspired by the toddler's bravery and the mother's resilience. They reached out, offering friendship, support, and simple gestures of kindness. This network of care helped both mother and child feel secure, reminding them that even after trauma, there could be a sense of community and belonging. Weeks passed, and the mother's health continued to improve. She was able to engage more actively with her child, playing, laughing, and sharing in small adventures. The toddler thrived, his courage and resilience now mixed with a sense of safety and joy. Together, they navigated the world with a new perspective, one that combined love, vigilance, and hope. The mother reflected on the events with a mixture of sorrow and gratitude. The fear and pain were real, but so was the bravery and love that had saved them. She knew that life would continue to have challenges, but she also knew that they had the strength to face them together. The toddler had shown her, in the purest form, the power of courage and instinct. And she, in turn, provided him with safety, guidance, unwavering love. As night fell on their home, the mother tucked her child into bed, holding him close for a moment longer. "You are my hero," she whispered, kissing his forehead. The toddler yawned, feeling safe and loved, unaware of the full scope of his heroism, but sensing the warmth and care surrounding him. In that quiet moment, mother and child both understood that no matter what had happened, they had each other. That bond would carry them through everything life could bring. The events of that fateful night remained in their memory, a reminder of the fragility of life and the power of courage. But more importantly, it became a story of hope, love, and resilience. The child's bravery had changed their fate. Their journey forward was now filled with safety, joy, and an unbreakable connection. Together, they faced the future with strength, hope, and a renewed understanding of the extraordinary power of love and courage in the smallest hearts. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle into a rhythm for the mother and her child. The initial shock of the event had faded, replaced by a careful balance of routine, safety, and love. Each morning, she would wake and look at her child, seeing not only the tiny human who had saved her life, but also a growing presence of courage and awareness. His small gestures of care had become a source of strength for her, and together they built a sense of normalcy that felt both comforting and precious. The toddler was curious, full of energy yet careful in ways that seemed beyond his age. He watched over his mother as she moved through their home, sometimes asking small questions about what she was doing or making sure she had water or a blanket. Every little act reminded her of the instinct and bravery he had shown in the past days. She was constantly amazed at how a child could possess such quiet strength, and it gave her hope for the days to come. She began planning small activities, moments to bring joy and learning into their lives. Together, they would go for short walks, explore nearby parks, and even visit the library. The toddler absorbed everything with wide-eyed interest, asking questions about the world around him. These moments of exploration were not only fun but healing. They helped both of them feel safe in a world that had once seemed threatening. Neighbors continued to show care and support, often stopping by to check if they needed anything. The mother was grateful, but she also appreciated the sense of independence she was reclaiming. She wanted to rebuild her life for her child, creating a space where they could feel safe and free. Every interaction with supportive neighbors and friends reinforced the lesson she had learned. Bravery and community together could overcome fear and uncertainty. The toddler, though young, seemed to understand the importance of caution. He had learned from experience that some situations were dangerous, and he carried a quiet awareness in his daily life. Yet, his bravery remained intact, tempered by wisdom. He showed kindness not only to his mother, but also to others around him, sharing small toys or helping in little ways that made life easier for everyone. It was a joy to watch him grow, balancing courage with care at home. They created routines that gave them comfort and structure. Breakfasts together, quiet afternoons with books and toys, and evenings spent talking or playing games became their anchors. These small routines were more than just daily habits. They were healing rituals that helped them both feel grounded and connected. Every day, the mother observed her child's growing confidence and independence. Marveling at how he had transformed from a scared toddler into a young person who could face the world with courage, she also took time for reflection, thinking about how fragile life could be and how important it was to appreciate each moment. The memory of the night when everything had changed was still vivid, but it no longer brought only fear. Instead, it reminded her of the power of love, instinct, and human connection. Her child's bravery had been the catalyst for their survival, and it taught her to look at the world with renewed gratitude and awareness. Friends and extended family visited regularly, bringing warmth, support, and encouragement. The toddler interacted with them with curiosity and friendliness, often recounting small details of his adventures and the help he had given his mother. Adults listened, sometimes in awe, sometimes with tears in their eyes. Realizing the depth of courage a young child could show, the mother encouraged him quietly, reinforcing that his actions mattered and that he should always be proud of the choices he had made. As the days passed, the mother became more confident in her own ability to protect and care for her child. She had learned lessons about vigilance, preparedness, and trusting her instincts. She taught her toddler about these same lessons in ways he could understand, turning everyday activities into gentle lessons about safety and awareness. He listened intently, absorbing her words and applying them in his own small, thoughtful ways. The neighborhood, too, had become a part of their support system. Friendly faces, caring gestures, and a sense of watchfulness created a safety net that made both mother and child feel secure. They realized that they were not alone and that human kindness could be found even in unexpected places. This sense of community became a quiet source of comfort, reinforcing the lessons of courage and care they had already learned. Evenings were often quiet and reflective. The mother would sit with her child, holding him close, sharing stories of courage, kindness, and resilience. She would remind him that bravery could take many forms, from small acts of care to decisive actions in moments of danger. The toddler listened, his eyes wide with understanding, sometimes nodding and sometimes responding with his own thoughts. These shared moments strengthened their bond and deepened the child's sense of empathy and courage. Through it all, the mother remained aware of the past and its lessons. She thought often about the night of the attack, about the fear, the helplessness, and the critical choices that had saved them. She realized that the past did not define them, but it had shaped them in important ways. Her child had become a source of strength and inspiration, not only for her, but for everyone who knew their story. Together they navigated each day with love, vigilance, and hope. Every small act, every quiet moment of connection, reinforced the extraordinary power of human courage and instinct. The child's bravery continued to be a guiding light, a reminder that even in the darkest times, action born from love could change the course of life. The mother, strengthened by her child's courage and the support of those around them, felt a sense of purpose and resolve that had been absent before. Weeks turned into months. Their lives continued to improve. They engaged more with the community, formed deeper connections, and developed routines that brought stability and joy. The mother watched her child grow, marveling at the resilience, kindness, and bravery he displayed every day. Each small gesture, each thoughtful action, was a testament to the lessons learned and the extraordinary journey they had endured together in the quiet moments before sleep. The mother would hold her child close, reflecting on how far they had come. She whispered words of love and gratitude, and the toddler, now confident and serene, held her hand tightly, understanding in his own way the bond that had carried them through the hardest times. Life had changed for them, but it had also revealed the strength, courage, an extraordinary love that could exist even in the smallest hearts. As they drifted to sleep, mother and child felt a profound sense of safety and connection. The events of the past months were behind them, but the lessons, the bravery, and the bond remained. Together, they faced the future with hope, trust, and the knowledge that love and courage could overcome fear and uncertainty. Their story was one of resilience, of triumph over adversity, and of the extraordinary power of a child's courage to change a life forever.